And let me see. Here we go. I'd like to offer that obviously as part of the CEQA process, it's going to be part of our requirement that we do put down what that baseline existing condition is. There is investment currently at the state level, at the local level, and the CEQA process is to compare and contrast how are you trying to modify those principles and policies to better align with now the Delta Plan. So there is already a spoken or unspoken set of priorities, or at least actions that are taken, that we will be looking at and comparing and contrasting the policy ramifications of how you might do it going forward. So I see there are two elements, or both the policy that you might establish for how to prioritize, and then also the question of who pays as a distinct issue. But that will be an explicit assessment that we will be providing, is compared to what's happening now, how are you modifying and what are the consequences of your changes in policy, if you are in fact going to make some, to get this investment strategy in alignment with your new policy statements from the plan.
If Johnston and Ruth Stoller.
I'd like to try and channel Hank Nordoff. At some point in the future, whether it's 15 months or some point, will there be a list recommending what the state ought to spend by Delta Island or by levee segment with an explanation of why the ranking is what is shown?
Yes, that is our goal.
And in the Louisiana example, is there a summary that we might look at that would give us a reference point of what ours, as different as the areas are, might look like?
We can provide you a summary that was included in the 2012 master plan, yes.
So that in addition to all the discussion of how priorities are set or what values people have and applying them to levee improvements, the product actually will be a game plan for how the state should, and other funding sources should, approach flood protection in the Delta. Is that right?
Correct. There's, I think, in addition to that as well, is a list is a single-time event, and that is an output of the tool, of the planning tool. The intent here is to develop a tool as well that the state then owns and can work, because as soon as you take an action or perform some segment of work, the conditions have changed.
Right. So you made that, and that's a good point, right, is that the update is necessary.
An update is necessary. So the idea is to have a tool that the state owns and works and then can run again and again. So thus the objective, as I understand, is not for a single static list, but a tool that will then allow... I
don't know, Phil, if this is what you were hinting at, but it struck me what you said is that until you say, well, this is what we might do in some specificity, a lot of people won't engage, and they really will engage at that point. And then you'll be arguing about what the principle meant as applied to why my island is less important than your island. Did you want to get to specificity, or did you want to get to a tool?
Well, look, I'll hearken back to your statute in 1992, which said the Delta is inherently flood prone. That's state description. Mm-hmm. If that is a starting point, and I believe it is the starting point for an investment strategy, that leads in various directions that are deeply controversial to local property owners and local governments in particular, because it implies that land use limitations to limit liability of the state and to limit the risk to new people, new property, and so on, are very much in play, circa General Galloway's various proposals up and down the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. If you don't start with those kinds of entry points, you'll never end up with them. You'll simply have the endless argument of what people prefer, and the preferences are always different depending on who talks to you. And so for me, the notion is pick the things that we already know are in statute. We have a holding action in the Delta plan, and it truly is a holding action until this develops. And the holding action, this is my shorthand, is the legislature should essentially continue its discretionary funding, but that understanding is it is discretionary. It is not required. It is not mandatory. Has, to the extent we can do it, no legal responsibility. I would think for a state investment strategy, we might want to consider an option that says no extension of liability for state responsibility without a specific enactment of the legislature assuming liability. Because otherwise, the Paterno case has taught, we're going to back in to that liability and that exposure on money, because we'll just talk about, gee, here's the things, here are the protection levels everybody wants, and just a matter of assembling how much money that might cost, and let's go find somebody to pay for it. That is not an investment strategy. That's a wish list. I want to avoid the wish list.
And what a planning tool does is allows you to input those constraints or those preferences and then look at the prioritization of a list. So for sensitivity analysis or within different stakeholder groups, you're allowed to run, or you have the ability to run different assumptions.
But what you're saying is you expect the council to make those choices.
I don't
and
have
you
the
may
authority.
recommend to us various positions, but you're not going to be preparing to start off with any of that. And that's okay, as long as you outline in writing what questions we should answer.
Right.
Right.
And that can clearly be done, at least start far in advance of 15 months.
No, these are some of the key items that we're looking at beginning to do in the kickoff meeting, is beginning to put those questions and working with Cindy and her staff to frame the direction of the study. Because you're right, that's going to happen in the very first step of the study, because it's start with the end in mind in terms of knowing where we're going on the principles. It's having different input and different understanding of constraints and preferences that we will put in into the tool. So, yes, I stand corrected there. That won't be 15 months out. That will be an initial point of departure.
Larry has been very efficient.
Gloria wanted to jump in.
I just